Silence walks on wet tiles. September rain falls. Steady, relentless. Miss Marple sits at her window. Knitting rests on her lap. The black cat moves along the ridge tiles of Nightshade Row. Step, pause, step, tail down, body low. It stops at the chimney of number 7, looks down to the gardens. Lady Bantry speaks from the armchair. "Jane, what are you watching?" "That black cat. Do you see it?" Lady Bantry joins her at the window. The cat sits above the front door of number 7, licks its paw. "Mrs. Bantam says it lives there. Impossible. That house was empty for years." "Someone feeds it," Miss Marple says. "It's too well fed to be a stray." "Maybe Alice Brent. She feeds strays. She's soft that way." Miss Marple nods once. Alice is kind, but tense these days. Exams soon. Scholarship hopes. The cat turns, moves toward number 6, disappears behind the chimney. Colonel Rayner lives there. Retired Army. Keeps medals. Keeps fountain pen inks. Lady Bantry sits back. Number 7 is let now. Stamp dealer from London. Hubert. Something. "Hubert Cressy," Miss Marple says. "Arrived yesterday. Wife with him." "You always know." Mrs. McGillicuddy's niece works at the estate agent's office. A knock at the door. Cherry answers. A man enters. Medium height. Rounded shoulders. Wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Marple, I'm Hubert Cressy. We've taken number 7 for a few weeks." Introductions made. Tea ordered. "I work with stamps, colonial issues, some valuable. My wife dislikes the house. Says it feels odd." "Odd?" Lady Bantry asks. "Previous tenants heard scratching in the walls. Saw a black cat. My wife thinks it's haunted." "Cats climb anywhere," Miss Marple says. "Yours seems at home on rooftops." "You've seen it too?" "No one knows its owner. Appears at dusk. Gone by morning." "Perhaps it belongs to no one," Miss Marple says. Talk shifts to his work. Albums, magnifiers, authentication. Cressy mentions rare Cape triangles. How to tell genuine from forgery. Lady Bantry asks about security. "Locked study," he says. "Careful handling." He glances at Miss Marple. "Sylvia would like company. Do call." He leaves. Lady Bantry looks at her friend. "Well?" "A pleasant man," Miss Marple says, "but his wife may find the weeks ahead different than expected." Lady Bantry frowns. "Why?" Miss Marple looks to the ridge tiles. Rain marks the line between houses. Her gaze holds. The black cat appears again above number 7. It freezes. Its yellow eyes fix on Miss Marple. One scream, then nothing. A cry slices through the morning. Miss Marple is at the window in seconds. Sylvia Cressy stands in the street. Blue dressing gown, hair loose. She grips the gatepost, face pale. He's dead. Hubert's dead. Miss Marple steps out, mackintosh over her shoulders. She reaches number 7, the front door, hangs open. Sylvia speaks quickly, breath uneven. He's in the study. The door's locked. From the inside. "You saw him?" "Through the keyhole. Slumped over the desk. There's blood." Mrs. McGillicuddy hurries up. Miss Marple tells her to call Dr. Haydock and Inspector Slack. Colonel Rayner appears from number 6. "What's going on?" "An accident. Perhaps worse," Miss Marple says. Dr. Haydock arrives in his car. Inspector Slack follows. A crowd gathers. Slack moves to the study, turns the handle. Locked. "Stand back," he says. Slack and Rayner force the door. Wood splinters. Hubert Cressy sits at the desk. Face down, right hand extended. Paper under his cheek. Stained, dark. Dr. Haydock leans over him. Checks the pulse. Shakes his head. "He's been dead several hours. Since after midnight, I'd say." Slack points at the neck. "What's that?" "A puncture wound. Small, precise," Haydock says. "The color looks like digitalis poisoning." Miss Marple stands back. Eyes moving over the room. The window is shut. Latch down. heavy curtains drawn. On the window seat, the black cat lies curled. It does not stir. Slack frowns. How did that get in? Alice Brent steps forward. Windows open during the day. For the post. Mr. Cressy told me to put letters through the study window if he didn't answer. Miss Marple walks to the desk. Stamp albums, magnifying glass, tweezers, small bottles, one album under Cressy's hand, several empty mounts. "Inspector," she says, "check his right thumb." Slack lifts the hand. A small piece of gummed paper clings to it. "Suicide," Slack says. "Locked door, key inside." Miss Marple doesn't answer. Her eyes stay on the album page. Empty mounts. The cat sits up now, watches, yellow eyes alert. Haydock finishes his check. Digitalis is lethal in the right dose. The wound, not self-inflicted, I think. Miss Marple moves to the cat. Its paws have dark smudges, not chimney soot. Fresher, glossy, lamp black. She files it away. Slack starts questioning the neighbors. Miss Marple leaves quietly. 4 facts in her mind. Locked room, missing stamps, lamp black, cat in the window seat. On the sill, the black cat lies down again. It closes its eyes. It sleeps through the chaos. Clean room, dirty paws. The cat jumps from the window seat. It walks across the desk. Miss Marple sees the paws. Fresh lamp black, glossy. A faint smell of oil clings to the fur. She glances at the desk. Albums open, magnifier, tweezers, small bottles of liquid. One album under Hubert's hand. Several mounts missing. She studies the spread, notes the pattern of missing stamps. "Inspector," she says, "his right thumb." Slack lifts the hand. A small gummed slip sticks to it. Slack shrugs. Locked room. Key inside. Looks like suicide to me. Suicide? Dr. Haydock frowns. With a needle to the neck? Digitalis? I doubt it. Miss Marple says nothing. She files the details away. Slack moves around the desk. Opens drawers. Looks for a note. Nothing. Alice Brent lingers near the door. Her eyes keep darting to the cat. Slack turns to her. "When did you last see him?" "Yesterday afternoon. He told me to put letters through the window. Didn't want to be disturbed. You feed the cat." She hesitates. "Sometimes. Not yesterday." Slack writes in his notebook. Colonel Rayner stands by the curtains. Room's locked, windows latched, curtains drawn, no way in. Miss Marple glances at the latch. Firm, no scratches. She checks the sill. No mud, no debris. The cat sits again on the window seat. Licks one paw. Lamp black smears on its tongue. Miss Marple notes it. Haydock moves to the body again. Time of death after midnight. Poison signs. Small wound. Precise placement. Slack folds his arms. If not suicide, then how and why? No one answers. Miss Marple turns back to the desk. She notes the bottles. One cap is loose. She looks at the floor under the desk. Clear. No sign of a struggle. The air in the room holds no smell of spilt chemicals. She kneels. Checks the carpet by the chair legs. Undisturbed pile. The black cat shifts position. Tail flicks. Slack watches her. "You see something I don't?" "I see a clean room," she says, "and a cat with dirty paws." Slack snorts. "Cats get dirty." "Not in a locked room," she says quietly. He frowns. She steps back, glances once more at the desk, then at the cat. The animal's eyes follow her. She walks toward the door. Colonel Rayner looks puzzled. "You're leaving?" "For now," she says. "I've seen enough." She steps into the hall. The sound of chairs scraping follows her. Slack giving orders. Haydock calling for the body to be moved. 2 officers lift Hubert from the chair. From the sole of his crepe shoe. A few dry clover seeds fall to the carpet. Rain last night. Dust today. Miss Marple crouches beside the fallen seeds. She rolls one between her fingers. Dry. It rained all night. She stands. These seeds didn't come from an open garden last night. Slack frowns. Then from where? Somewhere dry. Somewhere under cover. Colonel Rayner steps closer. There's an old allotment behind the terrace. Unused for years. Clover grows there. Some shelter from the house eaves. Miss Marple looks at him. How would one reach it? From the lane, or, he pauses, from the roof gutters at the back. The eaves project far. Old design. Gives a dry strip underneath. Slack crosses his arms. So, you're saying our dead man walked across rooftops to visit an abandoned allotment in the rain? I'm saying, Miss Marple replies, these seeds prove he walked somewhere dry when it was raining. Haydock bends to check the shoe. Leather scuffed above the sole. Fresh mark. Sharp edge scrape. Rayner nods. That would happen, climbing old guttering or rough brick. Slack's tone turns impatient. Locked room. Poison. Let's not waste time on botany. The seeds tell us where his shoes have been, Miss Marple says. Slack mutters. Still doesn't tell us how he died. No, she agrees, but it tells us where he went before. She studies the shoes again. Crepe soles. Flexible. Good for quiet steps. Haydock straightens. Not the shoes of a man used to rough walking. Which means, Miss Marple says, he went somewhere unusual for him. Somewhere worth the risk. Alice Brent edges forward. Mr. Cressy told me yesterday he wanted better light for photographs. Maybe he went out for that. Miss Marple nods slowly. And the allotment is open to the sky, but the ground beneath the eaves stays dry. Rayner says, if he knew the way. Slack shakes his head. Climbing out at night to take stamp photos? Sounds absurd. Absurd or not, Miss Marple says, he returned with dry seeds on his soles. She walks to the window, looks out across the back gardens. The roofs step down toward the allotment. Guttering runs the length. Rayner joins her. From here, a man could drop down to the allotment wall. Miss Marple glances back at the desk. If he went there, it wasn't for air. It was for something precise. Slack checks his watch. We'll have a look later. Miss Marple says, best soon. Rain may wash away any trace. Rayner looks between them. There's another detail. Slack raises an eyebrow. What now? Rayner says, Number 5 has attic roof access. From there, you can reach any house along this row. Ink remembers fingers. Constable Lake works the fingerprint brush over the ink pad. Slack stands beside him. Anything? Lake leans closer. 2 sets of prints. 2? Slack frowns. This larger one, right thumb, matches the deceased. And the second, much smaller, left little finger, clear ridge detail, pink nail varnish visible in the print. Slack turns to Sylvia Cressy. Your hands, please. She holds them out. Nails painted pink. Lake checks. Size too large to match the small print. Sylvia's voice is flat. I never touched his work things. Found them tedious. Slack looks at Alice Brent. Your hands. She shows them. Nails short. Clear varnish only. Lake shakes his head. Not her either. Miss Marple speaks quietly. Then someone else was here. Small hands. Pink varnish. Close enough to touch his desk without him present. Slack looks around. Who else had access? Colonel Rayner says, Number 5 has attic roof access. That's Basil Petta's house. Slack notes it. Petta, chemist, we'll speak to him. Alice shifts on her feet. I've seen him on the roofs, checking gutters, he says. Slack asks, any reason for him to be in this room? No, Alice replies. Lake continues dusting. Other prints on the desk are all smudged. These 2 on the pad are clear. Miss Marple steps closer. A little finger on an ink pad is unusual, not the way one stamps paper. Slack grunts. Could have been an accident. Or deliberate contact, Miss Marple says. The ink pad would keep a strong, lasting mark. Sylvia folds her arms. Basil wouldn't hurt anyone. He's polite. Slack writes in his notebook. We'll still speak to him. Lake finishes with the pad. Sets it aside. Slack turns to Miss Marple. You're thinking the small print matters. I'm thinking, she replies, that no detail in a locked room case is accidental. Colonel Rayner glances at the albums. Could someone have come in by the window? Alice shakes her head. The latch was down when I got here this morning. Slack says, then roof access is more likely. Miss Marple nods once. Slack calls to Lake. Get Petta here. Alice's eyes drift to the window. The black cat appears on the sill. Tail twitches. The ink pad on the desk glistens under its gaze. Tiles talk when pressed. Colonel Rayner leads Slack and Lake up through the attic of number 5. The trapdoor opens to the roof. They step out carefully. Rayner points. Fresh scuffs here, soft rubber soles. Size about 5 inches. Lake kneels. Measures quickly. Consistent depth. Not more than one person. Rayner moves along the gutter. See here, on the outward trip. Human prints over cat prints. Slack frowns. And on the way back, Rayner points again. Reverse. Cat prints over human. Miss Marple stands below in the garden. Watches them move. Rayner calls down. Means the cat went first. Person followed. On the return, the cat left after the person. Miss Marple says, then someone timed their movement to the cat's pattern. Slack steps along the gutter. Checks the distance to number 7. Possible to walk this without being seen from the street. Yes, Rayner says. Shadows cover most of the line. Lake notes the condition of the gutter. Dust disturbed. Moss crushed. Rayner says, this section connects straight to above Cressy's study window. Slack looks down at the back garden. A quick drop to the wall, then into the allotment. Miss Marple calls up. Time frame? Rayner answers, given the due, I'd say between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Miss Marple nods. Matches Sylvia's account. She heard the front door close around 11. Slack says, so the victim left, came back, locked the study. Someone else used the roof to get in? Rayner replies, or left after him. This path works both ways. Lake examines a bend in the gutter. Scrape here, likely from clothing. Rayner checks. Not metal. Fabric catch. They reach the section over. Number 7's study. Lake leans over. Window ledge shows no marks. Latch inside. Slack says, still could be reached, if opened earlier. Rayner nods. Possible. Depends on the occupant. Miss Marple calls again. Any sign of damage? Rayner says, only normal wear. And the scuffs. Lake shines a light into a corner joint. Wait, there's something caught here. He pulls at it, gently. A dark fabric thread comes free from a nail above number 7's gutter. Slack holds it up between 2 fingers. No one speaks. Milk cools fast. Not today. Miss Marple steps into the Cressy's kitchen. On the table, a saucer, half full of milk. She touches the rim, still warm. The clock reads 8:12. No pans on the stove, no kettle used. She looks at the back door, bolt in place. Slack enters. What's that? Milk, she says. Poured recently. For the cat? Perhaps. But not by Mrs. Cressy. She's upstairs with Doctor. Hey, Doc. Slack frowns. Then someone else was here. He checks the counter. No cups. No signs of breakfast. Miss Marple's eyes fall on a small medical kit on the shelf. Open. She looks inside. Bandages, cotton, small bottles. One slot is empty. Slack asks, what's missing? Syringe, she says. Slack's jaw tightens, and no one here admits to using it. She shakes her head. No. Footsteps in the hall. Basil Petta appears in the doorway. He carries a jug. Steam drifts from the spout. Thought the cat might like some warm milk, Basil says. Slack studies him. That for the cat outside? Yes. Poor thing's been on the roof since dawn. Miss Marple looks at his sleeve. You've a mark there. Basil glances down, a faint brown smear near the cuff. Rust, he says quickly, from the gutter nail yesterday. Slack steps closer. You were on the roof. I check the gutters now and then, Basil says. Keeps the rain out. Miss Marple asks, Did you come in here earlier? Number straight from my place. Slack points at the saucer. Milk was poured here less than 15 minutes ago. Basil shrugs. Not by me. Slack says, We'll need to see your shoes. Basil looks annoyed, but complies. Crepe soles, damp edges. Rayner enters. Back path's clear, no footprints in the soil. Miss Marple glances at the missing syringe slot again. Slack notices. You think it was used? It's not here, she says. And this kit belongs to Mrs. Cressy. Basil shifts the jug to his other hand. I've never touched it. Slack writes in his notebook. Dr. Haydock appears at the kitchen door. Sylvia's resting. No fresh injuries. Miss Marple asks, And the puncture on Hubert's neck? Too clean for a fall. Haydock says, Exact placement. Could be syringe. Or other fine instrument. Basil clears his throat. If you're done, I'll leave the milk and go. Slack lets him pass, but watches him go out the back door. Rayner says quietly, He's nervous. Miss Marple nods, and he knows the cat's movements well. Alice leans toward Miss Marple. Her voice drops. I heard steps in the night, she whispers. Not just the cat. Voices in brick and soot. Slack agrees to a night watch in the loft above number 7. Miss Marple insists on joining. They climb the narrow steps. Dust clings to their clothes. Soot hangs in the air, bitter on the tongue. A cold draft moves through the rafters. They keep still. Below, faint floor creaks. 2 voices. Slack tilts his head. Sylvia Cressy, Colonel Rayner. Their words carry in short bursts. It's gone, Sylvia says. Not gone, Rayner answers. Moved, safer. The Cape Triangle was never genuine, you know that. Miss Marple's eyes narrow. Rayner continues. We sell it as real. We split the profit. Simple. Sylvia's voice shakes. Hubert wouldn't agree. He didn't have to. Once the catalog pages were torn, there was no record. Miss Marple glances at Slack. He writes quietly in his notebook. Sylvia says, And if someone checks the mounts, they'll find the replacements, Rayner says. You're making this too complicated. Miss Marple notes the sequence. Forged stamp. Torn catalog. Profit motive. But motive for fraud, not murder. Sylvia lowers her voice further. Then why is he dead? A pause. Unrelated, Rayner says finally. Wrong place. Wrong time. Miss Marple hears fabric rustle. A floorboard groans. Sylvia again. What about the milk? Slack glances at Miss Marple. Rayner says, Milk means nothing. Sylvia's tone hardens. What if they find it? And the syringe? Slack freezes. Miss Marple leans closer to hear. Rayner says, Then you stay quiet. I'll handle the rest. Sylvia's breath quickens. I only wanted... Rayner cuts her off. We're not talking about this again. You stick to the plan. Footsteps cross the floor. A door closes somewhere below. Slack exhales slowly. Fraud's clear, murder's not. Miss Marple shakes her head. And there's more. She fears the syringe being found. They wait another 10 minutes. No further voices. Slack signals to leave. They back down the steps. avoiding loose boards. Once in the alley, Slack asks, "You think either of them killed him?" Miss Marple says, "Not yet, but they know who had access to that syringe." Slack shuts his notebook. "We'll confront them tomorrow." Miss Marple looks back at the loft window. No movement now. Inside, Sylvia sits alone. Her hands tremble. She whispers, "What if they find the milk?" And the syringe, proof torn, truth phrase. Slack lays the album on the table. Miss Marple turns the pages slowly. Pages 47 and 48. Gone. The tear is rough. Tiny black specks cling to the edges. She rubs one between her fingers. Lamp black. Slack says, "Same stuff on the cat's paws." Miss Marple nods. The ink isn't random. It's a mark from someone's workspace. Colonel Rayner stands with arms folded. Plenty of people use ink. "Not plenty," Miss Marple says, "just those with reason to reprint rare stamps." Rayner looks away. Slack flips back to page 46. "The Cape Triangle should be here?" "Yes," Marple says. "Its listing was on page 47. And now, nothing to connect it. No catalog record means no proof it ever existed." Slack writes in his notebook. Miss Marple studies the torn edges again. The specks are telling. Lamp black clings when paper is cut in a room where ink dust hangs. Rayner mutters, "Could be from anywhere. But you keep ink powder for your stamp reproductions," Marple says. His jaw tightens. "Forgeries are a hobby, nothing more." Slack's eyes narrow. "A hobby that becomes motive when real money is involved." Rayner doesn't reply. Miss Marple closes the album. "The stamps are the noise, Inspector. The method is the signal," Slack says. "Explain." "The room was locked, the window latched. The only way in without force is from above. Whoever killed him also knew how to hide a smaller crime in a larger one." Slack nods slowly. "So the forgery covered the murder, or the murder covered the forgery." "Exactly," Marple says. Dr. Haydock steps in. "Forgeries don't kill. Digitalis does true," Marple says. "But the same person could manage both, if they had reason." Slack turns to Rayner. "Where were you between 11 and 3? Rayner's tone is firm. "Home. Reading. Anyone confirm that?" "No." Miss Marple glances at the clock. Time matters. So does movement. The person on the roof could take the pages, leave the seeds, and administer the poison, all in minutes. Slack says, "Then we need to know who had all 3 opportunities." He moves toward the door. Miss Marple follows. "And who had reason to fear the syringe being found." They step into the hall. Rayner stays behind. Slack checks the street from the doorway. Across the road. Basil Petta hurries past. A heavy bag hangs from his shoulder. Slack watches him turn the corner, without looking back. A point fine as a lie. Dr. Haydock lays the report on the table. Slack reads the summary aloud. Wound diameter, 1 millimeter. Too small for any standard syringe needle. Miss Marple leans forward. Then what pierced the skin? Haydock says, "It's not medical." Shape suggests a writing point. Thin, rigid. Left no bruise around the site. Slack frowns. A pen. An old one, Haydock says. Quill or dip pen. A steel nib can pierce without sound, if the victim doesn't. Move, Marple says, and can deliver liquid if dipped. Haydock nods. Digitalis is easily dissolved. Slack checks his notes. We've been chasing a missing syringe. There never was one. Marple adds, the missing slot in the medical kit was deliberate misdirection. Haydock points to the wound diagram. A quill nib could hold a small drop, enough to kill, if potent. Slack looks at Marple. Anyone here own such a thing? She says, Colonel Rayner keeps antique pens. Basil Petta restores them. Slack mutters, and Basil was carrying that bag. Marple adds, lamp black on the wrong end of a pen would show handling by someone with dirty palms. Haydock confirms. There was lamp black residue inside the wound, mixed with the poison. Slack says, meaning the killer handled ink before the attack. Marple nods, which links us back to the forgery work. Slack stands. We'll find that quill. Rayner enters from the hall. Find what? Slack ignores him. Lake, check Basil's place. Look for pens, nibs, anything sharpened. Lake leaves at once. Rayner watches them. You think Basil killed Hubert? Marple says, I think Basil's work gave him the tools. Whether he used them is the question. Rayner says, and what about the roof prints? Size 5. That's not Basil. Slack replies, could be an accomplice. They hear the front door open. Lake returns moments later with Basil's bag. Slack opens it on the table. Inside, ink bottles, a blotter, 2 albums, and a long wooden case. Slack flips the latch. Inside the case lies a quill with a sharpened steel nib. Slack holds it up. The tip is stained dark. When the tail moves, time moves. Miss Marple stands at the back window. The black cat moves along the wall. She notes the hour, 6:43. Slack says, you've been watching it for days now. Marple nods. Its path is regular, out at dusk, back before dawn. Rayner adds, cats are creatures of habit. Marple replies, and that habit was exploited. Slack leans against the frame. Explain. The killer used the cat's movement as cover. Left when the cat left. Returned when the cat returned. Anyone seeing a shadow on the roof would think it was only the cat. Rayner says, and the dry seeds? Marple answers, the allotment under the deep eaves. Sheltered from the rain. That's where the seeds came from. The killer stepped there on the way back. Slack flips open his notebook. Timeline. Marple says, cat leaves before full dark. Around 7. Killer follows soon after. Victim still alive. The attack happens before midnight. By pre-dawn, the killer is gone. Rayner frowns, but the door was locked. Locked from inside after the attack. Marple says, the killer left by the roof, same as entry. Victim was beyond help by then. Slack looks at the saucer in the kitchen. And the milk. Marple says, drugged. It would slow the cat. Keep it from returning too early and alerting the household with noise. Rayner mutters, you think the cat could raise an alarm? Marple nods. If it reached the window before the killer left, it might have scratched or meowed. That risk was removed. Slack says, so the milk wasn't kindness. It was control. Exactly, Marple says. Haydock enters. Lab confirms digitalis in Hubert's system. No trace in the milk sample. Marple says, because the milk's dose was for the cat, not the man. Slack closes his notebook, meaning 2 separate administrations, 1 to sedate the cat, 1 to kill the victim. Rayner says, and the quill? Marple replies, the delivery method for the man. Slack paces. So far, Basil has the quill, the ink, and reason to be near the roof. Rayner has motive for forgery. Sylvia has fear of the syringe. Marple says, and the link is timing. Only one person matched their movements to the cat perfectly. Slack looks out at the roofline. The cat is gone from sight now. Marple watches too. That's your clock, Inspector. It's been running for years. Slack says, then we need to check who was awake and in position when the cat moved. Rayner says nothing. On the desk, Slack notices the ink pad. A tiny pink varnish touch shows on the corner of the cover flap. Guilt rubs the skin. Basil sits in the interview room. Slack watches from across the table. Through the glass, Marple observes. Basil's right palm keeps rubbing against his trouser leg. Slack says, "You've been on edge since we found the quill." Basil looks down. "It's just an old pen." "An old pen with poison traces," Slack says. Basil shakes his head. "I don't know about that." Marple steps inside. "Your palm shows lamp black, same as the nib, same as Hubert's wound." Basil exhales sharply. "I work with ink every day." "Not at that hour," Marple says, "and not on a roof." Slack leans forward. "You had digitalis. You knew how to dose it." Basil glances up. I restore old medical manuals. I've read about it." "And you were in debt," Slack says. "Deep debt. Enough to make theft tempting." Basil looks away. "I only meant to take the Cape Triangle. Replace it later, just to cover my losses." Marple says, "That explains the bag. The ink, the torn pages, but not the body." Basil swallows hard. "He wasn't supposed to be there." Slack says, "Hubert?" "Yes," Basil says quietly. "The light was off. I thought the study was empty." Marple asks, "So what happened?" Basil rubs his palm again. "I climbed down from the roof. The cat had gone to the other side. I slid in through the attic window." Slack says, "And?" "I opened the door to the study. He was at the desk." "Did he see you?" Marple asks. "He looked up," Basil says. "Just looked. No shout. No move. Just staring." Slack says, "And you panicked." Basil nods. "I reached for the pen. It was in my bag from earlier. I'd been repairing the nib." Marple says, "You dipped it." "There was an ink bottle." "I didn't think. My hand was already black from work. I pressed the point to his neck, just to make him move. I didn't realize," Slack cuts in, "that it was loaded with poison." Basil's voice drops. "I'd cleaned it in a solution earlier. Must have been residue from a job I did for Rayner last week. He needed it sharp for a special stamp mount." Marple says, "So you didn't plan to kill him?" "No," Basil says. "I wanted the stamp, that's all." Slack closes his notebook. Intent or not, he's dead. Basil stares at the table. His palm rubs faster. Basil's voice cracks. "He looked up," he says. "I reached for the pen." Every step answers a question. Slack stands with Marple in the study. "Notebook open," he says. "Let's walk it through." Marple nods. We begin at 10:50 p.m. Hubert leaves the parlor. He enters here, tests the light, sits at the desk. Slack marks the time. 11:15. Basil leaves number 5. He follows the cat's route along the wall to the gutter. Marple says, "Milk for the cat is already in place." Sedative mixed in. Cat delayed. Slack adds, "Roof tiles show his path." Size matches his shoes. Rubber scuffs confirm. Marple continues. He reaches the attic window, slides it open, drops into the dark hall. Slack says, "Hubert is still at the desk, writing, unaware." Marple nods. Basil opens the study door. Hubert looks up. "No alarm yet?" Slack says. Basil takes the quill from his bag. The same one we recovered. Lamp black still on the shaft from earlier work. Marple adds, he dips it in the inkwell. Digitalis residue from a previous job remains in the nib. He presses it into Hubert's neck. One precise strike. Slack says, Hubert reacts. Briefly, then collapses. Paper catches ink stain. Marple continues. Basil moves quickly. Removes the stamp mount. Inserts a replacement. Torn catalog pages are in his bag. Slack says, he wipes the nib on his palm without thinking. Ink and poison mix. Marple adds, he closes the study door. Locks it from inside. Leaves through the attic. Slack says, cat is still absent. Milk is cooling. Marple nods. He crosses the roof. Down to the sheltered allotment. Seeds stick to the soles of his shoes. Slack adds, he re-enters number 5 by roof access. Bag with mount, quill, and torn pages stays hidden there. Marple says, "Pre-dawn, the cat returns." Basil is inside. He sets the bag for later removal. Slack says, "By morning, Hubert is found." Door locked, window latched. Scene looks impossible. Marple adds, "Forgery, noise hides murder signal. Until we find the lamp black, the seeds, and the quill." Slack nods. That fits the timeline. Marple looks toward the ink pad. But one detail remains unexplained. Slack says, "Which?" Marple points. The pink finger on the pad cover, small, varnished. Slack frowns. Not Basil's. "No," Marple says. "It belongs to someone else in the house that night." Slack closes his notebook. So, the forgery was Basil's. The murder method accidental. But someone else was near enough to touch that pad. Marple says, "And that means the story isn't over yet." Marple turns from the desk. "But one detail remains," she says. "The pink finger." A tiny print. A big echo. Slack holds the ink pad in one hand. Marple stands beside him. "The pink varnish," she says. "We know it isn't Basil's. Not Sylvia's. Not Alice's." Slack asks, "Then whose?" Marple replies, "Mrs. Wickham, chemist's assistant at Pemberton's." Slack flips his notebook. "Why her?" "Because Basil ran an errand there," Marple says. "Earlier that evening, before the milk was placed." Slack raises an eyebrow. "Errand for what?" "Sedative," Marple answers. "Marked as tonic. She prepared it." Basil didn't question her. He told her it was for a restless animal. Slack says, "And the pink varnish?" Marple points to the pad. "She handled a paid stamp for his shop order, pressed it down, inked it. Her smallest finger brushed the corner of the pad cover. Varnish left behind." Slack nods slowly. "So she touched the pad in his possession." "Exactly," Marple says. "The pad then went with Basil when he entered Hubert's study." Slack says, "So the print was made before the murder, not during." Marple adds, "Yes." "Which means she wasn't at the scene when it happened. But she's still linked." "Linked how?" Slack asks. "She supplied the sedative," Marple says. "Knowingly or not, she enabled Basil's plan to keep the cat away. That makes her an accessory after the fact. Once she failed to report it." Slack looks toward the window. "Did she know about the forgery?" Marple shakes her head. "Unlikely. She's tied to Basil by trade, not stamps." Slack says, "But she's still a piece in the chain." Basil gets the sedative. Basil feeds the cat. Cat stays away. Basil has time to enter. Hubert is surprised. The quill delivers poison. Marple says, "And Mrs. Wickham's print travels into the crime scene without her knowing." Slack turns back to Basil, who sits at the table. Basil says nothing. Marple says, "Basil, she will be questioned." "Your part is already clear. You can lessen it by telling the full truth." Basil's shoulders drop. "I asked her for the tonic," Basil says. "Told her I'd pay cash. She didn't ask why." Slack says, "And she stamped your order slip." Basil nods. "Yes. She always does. Same pink nail varnish every week." Slack closes the notebook. "Then we have our chain of possession." Marple says, "But only you crossed the roof." Basil lowers his head. Slack turns to the constable. "Bring her in," he says. Basil stares at the floor. Rain ends. Ripples stay. Slack signs the arrest reports. Basil sits in the corner. Wrists cuffed. Charge, murder of Hubert Cressy. Sylvia stands next to Rayner, both silent. Charge, conspiracy to commit fraud and theft. 2 constables escort them out. Marple watches from the doorway. On the table, the recovered Cape Triangle. Inside a sealed evidence bag. Next to it, the restored catalog. Pages 47 and 48 back in place. Slack says forgery tied to Rayner and Sylvia. Murder tied to Basil. Timeline complete. Marple nods. Each crime hid behind the other. Slack says, without the seeds, the ink, and the quill, we'd have called it suicide. Marple says, or an accident, and the forgery would still be undiscovered. Rayner glares. It was never meant to go that far. Marple replies, intent does not erase action. Sylvia lowers her eyes. Constables lead them away. Slack turns to Marple. We'll send Mrs. Wickham's statement to the Crown. She'll face a lesser charge. Marple says her print explained, her role minor, but the link mattered. Slack nods. We've cleared the case. Marple says, we've closed it. Clearing is different. Slack frowns. What's left? Ripples, Marple says. They move long after the stone is gone. Slack looks at the sealed evidence. You think someone else will try again? Marple shrugs. Temptation has a long memory. Alice steps forward. In her arms, the black cat. She says, thought he might like his spot back. Marple says, he kept his own schedule. Best not to interfere now. Alice walks to the window, opens it. The cat jumps lightly to the roofline. Slack says, strange little creature. Marple says, a silent witness, more reliable than most people. Alice smiles faintly. He knew when to be gone, when to return. Slack replies, a better clock than we realized? Marple says, and perhaps wiser too. Alice strokes the cat once before letting go. Slack seals the last evidence bag. All right, that's everything for now, Marple says, until the next puzzle arrives. The cat pauses at the edge of the roof line. It turns its head toward Miss Marple. Its yellow eyes fix on her for a moment. Then it slips into the eaves and disappears. Some mercies purr. Lady Bantry pours the tea. Cups clink. Marple sits opposite, hands folded in her lap. Bantry says, how did you know? Marple replies, cats keep time. Ink keeps touch. Rain keeps score. Bantry tilts her head. Explain. Marple says, the cat's routine set the window. The ink pad told me of another touch. The dry seeds told me of shelter from the rain. Put together, they close the path. Bantry says, so, Basil. Yes, Marple answers. His route, his tools, his debts. The forgery hid the murder, but the details betrayed him. Bantry nods slowly. And Mrs. Wickham? Her part was smaller, Marple says. Her print was a clock hand. It told me when the pad was touched. And by whom. Bantry says, and Sylvia and Rayner. Fraud, Marple answers. Their theft set the noise in motion. Without it, Basil's act might have passed unseen. Bantry pours milk into her own cup. Still, a tangled web. Marple says always is. On the side table lies an opened letter. Bantry asks, what's that? Marple says, from Sylvia. A statement of remorse. She admits to the fraud. Says Hubert did not deserve his end. She regrets the noise that hid the truth. Bantry sips. And Alice. Marple's eyes soften. Scholarship. Awarded by the local historical society. She'll study archival conservation in London. She told me the cat will remain on Nightshade Row. Bantry smiles faintly. A better guardian than some people. Marple says, a witness who asked no questions, but answered enough. The mantel clock ticks steadily. Bantry says, do you ever tire of it? Marple shakes her head. Small details, large truths. They do not tire me. They remind me the world has order, even when it pretends to be chaos. Bantry says, and the people? They vary, Marple says. Some mean harm. Some mean none, yet cause it. Others repair a little of what is broken. The cat appears on the windowsill. Bantry watches it. He doesn't seem to mind the rain ending. Marple says, he knows the ripples remain. The cat jumps down, moves along the wall outside. Bantry says, "Will you keep in touch with Alice?" Marple nods. "Some threads are worth keeping." Bantry says, "Well, I'm glad you were there." Marple says, "So am I." Marple lifts her cup. She takes a slow sip. Then she sets it down and smiles. Chaos lost, order won. The bell outside tolls once.